Alright guys, now that we understand how to implement multiple validations, let's complete the validation implementation for our entire form. We'll add appropriate validations for the email and for the address fields. For the email field, we'll use both required and email pattern validation to ensure a valid email format is entered. Let's start by implementing these validations one by one, beginning with the email field. Just like we did with the name field, we'll add multiple validators and display appropriate error messages. Let's begin. First, let's modify our email form control to include both required and email pattern validations. In our component file, we'll update the email control in our form group to use an array of validators, just like we did with the name field. So first thing first, add the initial default value as a first parameter for this email form control. So as usual, for this also set an empty string. Just add an empty quote. Next, let's add the validation. So open and close an array scope. Just open and close square brackets. Inside that, let's add our first validation, which is required. So first add the validator. This V is capital. After this, add a dot and then the validation required. Next, let's add our second validation, which is email pattern validation. After the comma, add validators.email. This built-in validator will check if the entered value matches a basic email format pattern. Now that we have our email validation set up in the form control, let's implement the error messages in our template. Just like we did with the name field, we'll need to create separate error messages for both the required and email format validations. We'll use the same pattern of conditional rendering with the hasError method to show these messages at the appropriate times. Alright, so go to the app component HTML file, add the error message. So this also same as previous error message. So create a div and add the CS class validation error. Inside this div, we'll add our conditional error messages using the if block. Just like before, we'll check if the email field is touched and then check for specific validation errors. So add if block and add the condition. So this time we are dealing with the email input. So inside this parenthesis, add the condition. First, add userform.get. Then open the round brackets and pass the string email inside the brackets. After this, add a question mark for safe navigation followed by a dot and then add touched. This will check if the email field has been interacted with by the user or not. Next, we have to add the second statement. So add the AND operator and again add userform.get, then round brackets and again pass email inside as a string. Then add a question mark and a dot followed by invalid. With this, we are checking if the email field has any validation errors. Inside this if block, we'll add our specific error messages for both required and email format validations. Let's add our first error message for the required validation. Just like we did with the name field, we'll use another if block to check specifically for the required error. So inside the if block, add another if block and add the condition userform.get round brackets. Inside add the string email, then question mark and dot, and finally hasError, and inside its round brackets pass the string required. Inside this nested if block, we'll add a p tag with our error message that says email is required. So guys, this will handle our first validation case. Now let's add our second error message to handle the email format validation. After the first error message, add another if block. This time check for the email error. So again userform.get, then round brackets with the string email inside, then question mark and dot followed by hasError, and inside the round brackets pass the string email. Inside this block, add a p tag with the message, please enter a valid email address. This will appear when the user enters an incorrectly formatted email. Perfect. Alright guys, now let's test our email validation implementation. Save all the changes and go to the browser. Try submitting the form without entering an email. You should see the email is required message. Then try entering an invalid email format like test at symbol. You will see the please enter a valid email address message. Finally, enter a valid email address like test at example.com and both error messages should disappear. This completes our email field validation implementation. We've successfully added both required and format validations along with clear user-friendly error messages that appear at the appropriate times. Alright, so let's quickly set up the validation for the address text area. For the address field validation, let's add both required validation and a minimum length check to ensure users provide sufficient details. Just like we did with the name and email fields, we'll add these validations to our form control and implement appropriate error messages. Let's start by updating our address form control in the component file. We'll add an array of validators including validators.required and validators.minLength, and inside this minLength add the value 10. So first pass the initial value, then add the validations inside of square brackets. So open and close array scope. Inside this add the first validation, so validators.required. Next, add the second validation for minimum length, so add validators.minLength, and inside the round brackets pass the number 10. This combination of validations will ensure that users provide a detailed enough address. Next, let's implement the error messages in our template HTML file, following the same pattern we used for the name and email fields. We'll need to show appropriate messages for both the required and minimum length validations. So back to the HTML template and let's work on the error messages. So guys, for this I am not gonna write all from scratch. This is same like previous. So let's just copy the previous error message div with the if block. We'll take the name fields error div. So paste this copied validation error div here and let's modify it for our address field. We'll need to change the form control name from fname to address in all the conditions and update the error messages to be relevant for the address field. For the required error, we'll display address is required, and for the min length error, we'll show address must be at least 10 characters long. That's it. So save this all and go to the browser. Let's test our address validation implementation. When you click into the address field without entering anything, you will see the address is required message. As you start typing, once you enter some text but less than 10 characters, you will see the message about minimum length. And when you enter 10 or more characters, both error messages will disappear, confirming that our validation is working correctly. Awesome, right? So guys, this is the end of this lecture. Let's meet you in the next lecture. Perfect.